Bilingual education was originally designed to provide equitable education for all, but has since become an issue of culture, politics, and economics. And in the midst of the debate, these students continue to disproportionately drop out of school. And, you know, the conversation so far, and I can understand why, and maybe I'm at fault because I let it be this way, we've talked about uniform groups of language learners, and in areas of high immigration, often it is a teacher walking in front of a classroom where most of the kids began speaking one particular language. But there are many neighborhoods in this country where you have maybe 6 or 8 Gujarati speakers, another 6 or 8 Korean speakers, and on and on. And there is no one single group from which to form a class, but they're all, let's say, 8 years old, and you want to teach them all the 3rd grade curriculum content. In places like that, how do you both move them all forward, get them English, but also deal with the fact that many of them can't even speak to each other?
We, in places, for example, in New York City, you'll have neighborhoods that have literally 20, 30 different languages spoken within the neighborhood. Or you'll have in the district itself 160 different languages spoken. So this is where, and again, without putting all the pressure that is already on incredibly hardworking teachers, this is where the whole notion of teacher support and teacher skill becomes so critical. And how do we support this? How do we do the professional development? How do we have really good, reflective programs where not simply bilingual programs, but dual language programs and other kinds of dual language programs I put in a different category, but dual language, bilingual, ESL programs, and where, at least in a city like New York, you could actually give parents a choice in terms of where to send their kids. But it does actually start with having very good support programs for teachers, and also some tutorial and other kinds of programs where you can deal on a one-to-one basis with kids.
Don, is this one of those places that argue for immersion because conventionally understood bilingual ed is not necessarily applicable?
Kids don't just learn English sitting at a desk listening to a teacher talk. Kids can learn English, as you know, in a lunchroom, in the hallways, in recess. And when you have Latino kids, typically it's those kids who are at greatest risk because they can be segregated in a separate classroom, where in many cases there's just not a lot of learning going on in that classroom, regardless of whether it's learning English. When kids have the opportunity to talk to other kids and listen to other kids talk, and are out of a segregated, isolated environment, they're much more likely to have success.
Phoebe?
But that assumes that then the onus is on the children. And it's not on the children, it's on the system that you put in place. The fact that a group of Latino kids can be segregated in a room and no learning happens, then to me somehow says then something is wrong with these Latino kids. It really is about a system, and it's system choices of how it
Something's wrong
chooses
with the school.
With the school that's doing that. It's not the children. And so I think we really have to take a look at what the models are that we're using. I think the issue came up a little bit ago around whether you're talking about recent immigrants, or you're talking about first or second generation. I think we have to look at the fact that we're now especially in urban centers, dealing with the children who are first, second generation, however you count the generations, but whose parents may have come as young children and received lousy education in those urban schools. And their proficiency, either in English or in Spanish, is not strong. Their literacy skills are low, and they're parenting now the next generation of young children. And that's what we have to, so what is the model that works for that for that set of children, versus the children that were the recent immigrants in a more homogeneous kind of an environment? And so the traditional home language identifiers that we were using when we started with bilingual education aren't working anymore. And so we've got to be looking ahead. We now know that we have the kind of population we have. We need to look at teacher education in the universities. How are they preparing children for this change in demographics? I think we're still years behind in teacher education. So again, I always go back to the policy, the programmatic, and the systemic pieces that all have to play along with each other, and we have to move ahead in order to be able to provide quality education. And we certainly can't blame the children in the classroom.
From a strategy and tactics point of view, we mentioned earlier that 2 out of every 3 kids who need these kind of services are Spanish speakers.
Right.
But do you bring along the Koreans? Do you bring along the Chinese? Do you bring along the South Asians and say, we're in this fight together? Or is the size of the Latino constituency so large that you can really just put on your armor and head to the hill and go fight there?
I think that we're reaching a point where we have to start working together. We've been doing this for the last 30, 35 years, and since we were the largest group, Hispanics were the largest group, we sort of seen ourselves as taking the charge. And now that you have 100 and some languages spoken and you have this differentiations in the schools, I think we have to make the country, and I don't think we've internalized as a country, that we are trying to provide a quality education to all students. We haven't internalized that. I think that we still feel in many places that education is going to be unequal because children are unequal. And the expectations are different for different types of students. So I think that as we have immigration from other countries, from Africa, from other places, we're going to have to coalesce to ensure that the message is clear, that quality education is not for the wealthy kids, it's not for the middle class kids, it is for all kids.
But at a time, Randy Weingarten, when we fund a lot of education for a lot of kids in this country out of real estate taxes, and the value of houses is plummeting. This week, out came the number, 20% drop in the value. Can we do the expensive things that we're talking about when also the need for a language approach is increasing at a time when our ability to pay for it all is decreasing?
Look, we don't have, I mean, this is what makes at least the educators as great as they are. We don't have a choice. We're going to have to try to do it regardless. And let me end on at least my piece, on a positive note. I've seen programs, we've all seen programs that need to be improved, but I've also seen programs that are amazing. And so, for example, the international high schools, some in New York, one in Berkeley, some in other places, these are schools that have actually dealt with high mobility, dealt with immigrant kids, and have been incredibly successful in terms of how we prepare kids for college. And what we have going for us in these United States of America these days, Bibi said it, is the technology and to be able to emulate proven as well as promising programs. So let's take that new funding that the Congress, President has given us in terms of the stimulus fund, $100 billion for education, and that new $5 billion Race to the Top program, and let's see if we can replicate proven programs as well as promising models so we help all our kids.
And Don, quick final comment, keeping in mind what? If you take that assignment, what do you want to warn people to keep in mind?
If between a third and a half of all 16 to 24-year-old males who are Latino, who are in Chicago, are dropouts, the cost of that is something we need to take into account. And we have fantastic schools like Bibi's that are achieving remarkable results with largely poor populations, largely populations whose parents didn't go to college. And there are best practices coming out of those schools that are expensive, and there are some that are less expensive. We need to do everything we can do to fix this.
Guests, thank you for walking us through a knotty and challenging topic, and thanks for coming out.